The senator that was saying that the president needs to come back for reauthorization, I don't remember him saying anything in 2016 when Barack Obama at the time dropped 26,000 bombs in Syria, Pakistan, Libya, just to name a few. And I definitely don't remember my colleagues in 2013 at all complaining about the president then Barack Obama, going into Syria. And I would like to ask the question then, what threat did Syria have to the United States? What threat did Libya have to the United States?
A heated exchange unfolded during a congressional hearing when Senator Markwayne Mullin forcefully pushed back against criticism from Democrats over presidential war powers and military intervention. The debate erupted after lawmakers raised concerns about the legality and oversight of recent military action involving Iran. Critics in Congress, including figures aligned with Representative Adam Schiff, questioned whether the president had exceeded constitutional authority by taking action without direct congressional approval. But Mullin turned the conversation in a different direction. Instead of focusing only on the current administration, he pointed to what he described as a long-standing pattern in Washington, one where both political parties have supported or tolerated military intervention when their own side was in power. In particular, Mullin referenced the presidency of Barack Obama, arguing that large-scale military operations during that period rarely faced the same level of congressional outrage now being directed at more recent actions. During his remarks, Mullin cited statistics showing that thousands of bombs were dropped in multiple countries during earlier counterterrorism campaigns. He specifically mentioned operations in Syria, Libya, and Pakistan, raising a pointed question to his colleagues. Where was the same level of alarm over war powers at that time? For Mullin, the issue wasn't simply about defending one president's decision. He framed it as a broader question of consistency, asking whether Congress applies the same standards to military actions depending on which party controls the White House. The hearing room grew noticeably tense as he laid out that argument, turning what began as a procedural debate into a direct political confrontation.
To us. Do we really need to talk about it? Do we need to talk about how many times they've killed thousands of Americans since 1979? From the first time they took hostages in November of 1979 to the last time they attacked us in June of 2025? And anybody wants to doubt that they were a threat to us, an essential threat to us? Does anybody doubt on that side of the aisle, does anybody doubt that Iran, if or when they got a nuclear weapon, would deliver it to the United States if they have the capability of doing it? Does anybody deny that the fact that the president was being proactive on an adversary that has been chanting death to America since 1979? Does anybody deny that Iran was a threat to us and our service members? Or do we have to remind you how many they've injured and killed through their proxies and through direct action? This is the first president in 7 presidencies that actually did something about the thorn that constantly came after us. And now you criticize him and you say it's illegal? It's not. This same authorization is the same authorization that Democrats and Republican presidents in the past have used. And thank God we had a president with a backbone to finally get rid of this murderous regime. And now we're complaining about it? Remember, legally, he has to respond to Congress or inform Congress in 48 hours. That has happened. And then within 60 to 90 days, he needs to inform Congress if we're going to war and ask for specific war authorities. But the president, through Article 2, clearly has an obligation and the powers under the Constitution to defend our interests home and abroad. And there is no question he's defending our interest. No question. So what is this grandstanding about? Do you think we should have let the Ayatollah in place?
As the exchange intensified, Mullin shifted his focus to the broader geopolitical context, arguing that the United States has faced sustained hostility from Iran for decades. He referenced the long history of tensions between Washington and Tehran, beginning with the 1979 hostage crisis, when American diplomats were held captive during the Iranian Revolution. According to Mullin, that event marked the beginning of more than 4 decades of conflict between the two nations. He also pointed to attacks on U.S. forces and allies in the Middle East carried out by groups believed to be backed by Iran. For Mullin, those incidents demonstrate that Iran represents an ongoing threat to American personnel and strategic interests in the region. That perspective formed the core of his argument during the hearing. He insisted that the president, as commander-in-chief, has both the constitutional authority and the responsibility to act quickly when national security is at stake. Mullin also argued that the legal framework used for recent military actions is not new. Presidents from both parties, he said, have relied on similar interpretations of existing military authorizations to conduct operations abroad. In other words, he suggested that critics of the current administration may be applying a different standard than the one used in previous years. At one point, Mullin challenged lawmakers directly, asking whether they truly believed Iran posed no threat to the United States or its allies. The room reportedly fell quiet as the senator delivered that line, a moment that underscored just how deeply divided Congress remains on questions of foreign policy and executive power. For supporters of the president's decision, the action represented a decisive move against a government they view as a major sponsor of terrorism. But for critics, it raised concerns about whether Congress is gradually losing its constitutional role in decisions that could ultimately lead to war. The confrontation during this hearing highlights a much larger and long-running debate in American government: who ultimately controls the power to wage war? Under the U.S. Constitution, Congress holds the authority to declare war. However, over the past several decades, presidents have increasingly used military force without formal declarations, often relying on broad authorizations passed after the September 11th attacks. These authorizations were originally intended to target terrorist organizations, but critics argue they have gradually been interpreted more broadly over time. Supporters of strong presidential authority say this flexibility is necessary in a modern security environment where threats can emerge rapidly and unpredictably. They argue that waiting for lengthy congressional debates could limit the government's ability to respond to attacks or emerging dangers. On the other hand, critics warn that expanding executive power in this way risks weakening one of the Constitution's key checks and balances. The exchange between Mullin and his colleagues illustrates how unresolved that debate remains. For some lawmakers, the central issue is whether presidents, regardless of party, should have the ability to launch military actions without explicit approval from Congress. For others, the priority is ensuring that the United States can respond decisively to adversaries like Iran. What made this particular hearing notable is how directly those competing perspectives collided in public. Rather than focusing only on legal arguments, the debate quickly turned into a broader political clash over historical precedent, partisan consistency, and national security strategy. And as tensions between major powers and regional rivals continue to shape global politics, the questions raised in that hearing are unlikely to disappear anytime soon. In fact, moments like this suggest that the struggle over war powers, and who gets to decide when America goes to war, may remain one of the most contentious issues in Washington for years to come.